Hey everyone, today we continue the saga of the Omega Blade. This is Chapter 6. 16-year-old Valerius Ironshade stood in a circular room holding a 5-foot axe with 2 wooden blades. 16-year-old Kaylee Stoneclaw stood across from him holding 2 wooden swords that had been attached at the handles to form a single double-bladed weapon measuring nearly 7 feet in length. She was 2 inches taller than him, her strawberry blonde hair was tied behind her head, and her gray eyes studied him, waiting to see what he would do. Before Val could do anything, Kaylee rushed forward, slashing at him with her twin blades. He backed up, blocking each attack with his weapon's shaft. After dodging one attack, he struck back, slashing at different angles. Kaylee blocked and parried each strike, her weapon's length making dodging more difficult. They went back and forth for a minute, then 2, neither able to penetrate the other's defenses. Deciding to try something new, Val dropped his weapon, lowered his hand, and rushed Kaylee, driving his shoulder into her abdomen and tackling her to the ground. She lost hold of her weapon as he did, and after a brief struggle he managed to pin her down. "Got you," Val said, grinning. "Say it." She rolled her eyes. "Val's the best. Now give me a Kaylee cut him off by pulling him down into a kiss. As Val kissed back, he noticed that something felt different. Before he could give it any thought, his mouth was invaded by her tongue and he tangled his with it. Val could feel her hands moving from his shoulders to his back as they made out. It wasn't the first time one of them had slipped the other some tongue, but it had never lasted so long. Suddenly he felt a hand pulling his shirt up and he quickly broke the kiss. They locked eyes, both panting softly. "I was enjoying that," she said, clearly disappointed. "So was I," he admitted. Her expression became one of confusion. "And why'd you stop?" "I got my prize." Kaylee let her head fall back. "Isn't there anything else you want?" she asked, looking at him in a way she'd never had before. It took Val a moment to recognize the look she was giving him as sultry. "What are you saying?" he asked, wanting to make sure there was no miscommunication. "We've been fighting for kisses for years, Val," she said, bending her knees and bringing her feet closer to her body. "Don't you think it's about time we stopped dancing around what we really want?" Looking down, he realized she wasn't just bending her legs, but spreading them. "Kaylee, I don't think—" "Look at me, Val," she interrupted. He looked back at her face. "I want you, Val," Kaylee said, reaching down between his legs. "I want this." His eyes widened as he felt her rubbing him, and a groan escaped his lips. He leaned down, she turned her head to the left, and he began planting soft kisses on the right side of her neck. A small moan escaped her lip at first contact, and she reached up to hold his shoulders. "You want me inside you?" he asked softly. "Yes," she hissed. "Please, Val." He lifted his head to look down at her. "Then you're gonna have to earn it." Kaylee's eyes widened as he got off of her. "You wouldn't," she said, shocked. Val picked up his wooden axe. "Watch me." She scoffed as she realized he was serious. "I hate you so much right now," she said as she got up, the small smile on her face making it clear that she didn't really. "I know. You're seriously going to leave me all worked up like this." He smiled mischievously. "Consider it extra motivation to win." 13 years later, Val watched in shock as Kaylee walked out into the arena. Her strawberry blonde hair had been cut to neck length, and she wore full-body steel armor similar in design to his own. Her right vambrace was visibly thicker than her left, and she carried a double-bladed sword in her left hand, letting one of the blades drag in the dirt behind her. "Is that the Kaylee you told us about?" Aaron asked, seeing the look on Val's face. He nodded. "Assuming I'm not imagining things, yes." "Her opponent is last year's champion," Kira announced. "Please welcome back Marona." A half-elf woman in her late 40s walked out. Standing 3 inches taller than Kaylee, Marona had blue eyes, brown skin, and shoulder-length black hair. She wore thick leather armor with metal studs, had a heater shield strapped to her left forearm, and carried an elven sword with a slightly curved blade in her right hand. "Our fighters have agreed to one weapon, no enchantments," Kira said. "The requirements for victory are death or forfeit. Understand?" They both gave her a thumbs up. "Then begin!" Both women advanced cautiously, and Kaylee attacked first. Marona blocked a pair of quick slashes, then struck back, nearly taking out Kaylee's left eye. Kaylee spun her weapon in her hands as she circled her opponent. She lashed out again, and after parrying and dodging each strike, Marona rushed Kaylee, using her shield to knock her to the ground. Kaylee was back on her feet so fast that her back could never fully touch dirt, hammering Marona's defenses. Although Kaylee's weapon was around 7 feet in length, its blades were slightly shorter than the one on Marona's sword. Unfortunately for Marona, she couldn't use that to her advantage because Kaylee was too close. She used her shield to push Kaylee back, though Kaylee managed to stay on her feet. Marona went on the offensive, and although Kaylee batted aside most of the attacks, one got through and left a small dent in her helmet. Furrowing her brow, Kaylee lashed out, suddenly moving faster than she had up to that point. Her ferocity allowed her to finally break through Morono's defenses and drive one blade through the half-elf's stomach, then slash her throat with the other. "Our final winner of the day, Kaylee Stoneclaw," Kira said excitedly. Val was waiting at the gate to the arena when Kaylee walked out. Her weapon was sheathed and strapped to her back. She was carrying her helmet under her right arm, and she had a small bruise on her forehead. She walked right past him, then stopped and turned to face him, her gray eyes wide. "Val?" she asked, sounding unsure if it was really him. Val couldn't help grinning. "Hi, Kaylee." Kaylee rushed towards him before he finished speaking, and her armor audibly clanged against his as she awkwardly hugged him. She hadn't grown since the last time they'd seen each other, so she was about 2 inches shorter than him. "Care to introduce us?" Laeric asked. "Everyone, this is Kaylee," Val said. He'd told the others about her in the past, so they all knew he was introducing his childhood friend. "Kaylee, this is Aaron, Luxia, Laeric, and Nephrius." Kion cleared her throat. "Right, sorry, this is Princess Kion." Kaylee's eyes widened. "I saw your fight on the first day. Those arrows were poisoned, weren't they?" Kion nodded. "Made specially in Cantoreth. Interesting." "What do you call your weapon anyway?" Kion inquired. "What sort of enchantment does it have?" "The Blades of Orthrus," Kaylee replied. "It's actually 2 enchantments in one. It either boosts my offense or my defense, but unfortunately not at the same time." After a short conversation, they split up. Nephrius led Laeric back to their tent, and Lux followed Kion to hers. Val started to follow Kaylee, but Aaron grabbed his arm. "Be safe, okay?" she asked. "I know you two were close, but you're different people now than you were then." He nodded. "I know." He turned to leave, but she stopped him again. "With that being said, rock her damn world," she said, looking him in the eyes. "Depending on how tomorrow goes, it might be the last chance you get." Val chuckled. "Thanks, I will." He turned and walked away, leaving Aaron to walk back to the 4-person tent alone. Filling her tub with water, she changed into her waterproof dress and climbed in. The feeling she'd had about Val 2 days earlier had returned, so she focused on it, trying to identify it. It wasn't anger or jealousy. She was happy that he had found Kaylee, slightly worried that Kaylee might break his heart, and curious as to whether or not she could beat Kaylee in a fight, but it wasn't any of those. It was something else. Deciding to sleep on it, she submerged herself completely and closed her eyes. Kaylee led Val to 4 tents that had a fire pit dug between them. 2 orc women were seated on one side of the fire. Kaylee greeted them in Orcish, then led Val into the northern tent. "I'm surprised it took us this long to cross paths," she said, setting down her weapon and removing her vambraces. "I didn't even know you were here," Val admitted, starting to remove his own armor. "When the announcer said your name, I thought it was a mistake, but then you actually walked out." She started to remove her chest plate, then looked back over her shoulder at him. "You look good, Val." He smiled. "You look incredible." They both finished removing their armor, then Kaylee turned around to fully face him. Stepping closer, he reached out to cup her face, only for her to catch his wrist. "You gotta earn that," she said, looking him in the eyes. He raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She smiled mischievously. "Really?" Suddenly they were sparring like no time had passed, catching each other's punches and stepping over each other's kicks. Val managed to catch Kaylee's wrists and pull her into a kiss, and she melted against him as she kissed back. Soon he was on top of her and helping her take off his pants. Then he was inside her and nothing else mattered. Unable to fall asleep, Erin changed into dry clothes, then made her way to the tents surrounding Arena 6 and looked around until she spotted 4 Dragonborn men sitting at a table playing a dice game. One had black skin, one had red, one had gold, and one had silver. 4 6s, the red Dragonborn said. The gold Dragonborn scratched his chin. 6 4s. "Liar!" the silver Dragonborn exclaimed. 4 of them each lifted their cups, revealing 5 dice each and a total of 8 4s. Grumbling, the silver Dragonborn handed his gold-skinned companion 6 silver coins. "Thastic Taxon?" Erin asked. The gold-skinned Dragonborn looked up at her. "Aren't you the one who handed Tharmand his unarmored ass?" She nodded. "I am, yes." "You haven't been eliminated yet, so I doubt you're here for a fight," Thastic surmised. "What can I do for you?" "How much control do you have over your fire breath?" He gave her a confused look. "In what regard?" "The heat," she clarified. "How precise are you?" He sighed. "What are you trying to do?" "I have a 6-foot tub filled with water," Erin explained. "I need to boil the water without damaging the tub." "Interesting," he leaned back in his chair. "I like a challenge, but I still expect some payment. How does 5 copper sound?" He thought for a moment. "Make it 5 gold. 1 gold. 25 silver." Erin thought for a moment, then pulled out 1 gold coin and 5 silver coins and placed them on the table. "You'll get the rest after." The next day, Val, Lux, Laeric, and Nephrius were in the stands of Arena 1 when Arjun Skullbrook walked out onto his podium. Val, Aaron, Kaylee, and Kion had all won their quarterfinal fights that morning, and the semifinals were about to begin. "For our next match, please welcome Aaron Damixeth," Arjun exclaimed. Erin walked out wearing her Leviathan hide armor and carrying her trident. In place of her broken Xian, she carried the Sword of Freya, which she had borrowed from Lux. Facing her, please welcome Princess Kion. Kion didn't have her bow when she walked out, instead carrying her sword, shield, and daggers. Random selection has determined that our fighters may use 2 melee weapons and 2 enchantments, but no ranged weapons, Arjun said. The requirements for victory will be death or forfeit. Failure to follow the rules will be considered forfeiture. Do you both understand? They both gave him a thumbs up. Excellent. Fight! Erin and Kion closed to within 10 feet of each other, then started circling. Kion lashed out first, and Erin parried the slash before jabbing with her trident. Kion blocked the strike with her shield, then slashed low. They went back and forth, attacking and defending, neither able to get past the other's defenses. Only when Erin managed to get around Kion's right side was she able to penetrate her armor, and although the quick jab didn't do any meaningful damage, it did draw first blood. Fuck! Kion gasped. Turning, she lashed out with increased ferocity, attacking from unexpected angles and managing to disarm Erin of her trident. Drawing her borrowed sword without missing a beat, Erin crossed blades with the princess, soon managing to disarm her. Erin expected Kion to draw a dagger, so she was caught off guard when the princess slammed her shield into her, dislocating the trident woman's right shoulder. Erin cried out in pain and dropped her sword as she stumbled back. Remembering her trident, she rushed over to it, while Kion drew a dagger and followed. Picking up the fallen weapon in her uninjured left hand, Erin turned and fired a jet of boiling water at Kion. The princess raised her shield just in time to protect her face, but the water blast sent her flying back and she let out a shriek before being slammed into the arena's protective spell and falling face down. No! Lux gasped. Kion groaned in pain as she pushed herself up off the ground. Although her face had been protected from the blast, the rest of her exposed skin was covered in blisters. She had dropped her dagger while flying through the air, so once she was back on her feet, she drew her second dagger before advancing on her opponent. Erin was back on her feet as well, barely able to stand due to the pain. Knowing she most likely couldn't win, she let her trident fall to the dirt. I yield! She shouted, clutching her right shoulder. Arjun declared Kion the winner, and clerics rushed over, resetting Erin's arm and healing Kion's burns. Once the arena was clear, there was a short break. Then Arjun returned to his podium. Ladies and gentlemen, Valerius Ironshade! Val walked out carrying his halberd in both hands. His opponent, Kaylee Stoneclaw! Kaylee walked out carrying her double sword in her left hand, one blade dragging in the dirt behind her. Our fighters have agreed to use 1 enchantment and 1 weapon of any kind, Arjun explained. The requirements for victory will be death, forfeit, or incapacitation. Do you both understand? They both gave him a thumbs up. Fantastic. Begin! Despite what many thought, double-bladed weapons were deceptively impractical. They allowed for more powerful attacks, but at the cost of some precision. They also allowed for a wider variety of defensive options than a single blade, but they prevented the user from making certain basic moves without hitting themselves. The primary advantage was that because they were so difficult to master, most warriors were unfamiliar with their strengths and weaknesses and therefore didn't know how to counter them. Inexperienced warriors facing a double-bladed weapon tended to split their focus between both blades, something that often cost them their lives. Because the blades were connected, a warrior only had to keep track of one at a time and would always know where the other was by extension. Although it had been over a decade since Val had crossed blades with Kaylee, he had faced enough opponents wielding double-bladed weapons during that time to keep his skills fairly sharp. As Kaylee hammered his defenses, he was able to block and parry each strike with only a couple scratches to his armor. Finally finding an opening, he counterattacked, forcing her to give ground. He knew he could never kill her, and he was hesitant to hurt her, but he knew any injuries he caused could be healed by the clerics. Pressing the attack, he managed to get past her defenses and bury his weapon's spearhead an inch deep in her left shoulder where there was a gap in her armor. After a brief pause, Kaylee attacked, but Val quickly turned the tables, again putting her on the defensive. After blocking and parrying over a dozen strikes, she slashed at him, only for him to dodge her blade and slam his weapon's axe blade into her back. Her armor protected her, but the impact sent her stumbling. I've missed this, he said, as they turned to face each other. You've definitely improved. So have I, Kaylee said, panting softly, and so have you. Before he could do anything, she gave her weapon a quick twist. The long handle separated in the middle, and suddenly she was armed not with one double-bladed sword, but with a pair of single blades, one in each hand. Val hesitated. Dual-wielding small weapons such as daggers, sickles, short swords, clubs, and short axes was fairly common among warriors of every class. Some, like Nefrius and Kion, simply wielded 2 identical weapons, while others preferred to mix and match. Just as many warriors learned to wield a small weapon in their offhand to supplement a larger weapon in their dominant hand, with the small weapon taking the place of a shield. Dual-wielding full-length weapons such as longswords is something many warriors attempted but few ever mastered. It was a difficult technique, even more so than a double-bladed weapon, and it was most commonly attempted either to show off or out of desperation. Like wielding a double-bladed weapon, its biggest advantage was that the average warrior didn't know its strengths and weaknesses, and thus had no idea how to counter it. The difference was that, while splitting focus between the blades of a double-bladed weapon was a common mistake, doing so against an opponent wielding two separate weapons was crucial to survival. Val barely had time to wonder where Kaylee had acquired such a versatile weapon before she bore down on him again. It was immediately clear that she had been holding back slightly during the first part of their fight, and he found himself pushed close to his limit. He was able to fend off her ferocious assault, but it left him unable to strike back without exposing himself. Just when he thought he saw an opening, she suddenly slashed downwards with both swords at once, breaking the halbert's copper shaft with no visible damage to either blade. Holding the broken shaft like a dagger in a reverse grip, Val used it to hook her right sword and disarm her of it. Before he could do anything else, Kaylee backhanded him with her right vambrace, disorienting him. She snatched the top of his halberd out of his hand, then stabbed his unarmored right side with the spearhead. She followed up with a diagonal slash across his face, and suddenly Val's world went black. "Kaylee Stoneclaw will go to the final round," Arjun announced. As clerics arrived and carried Val out of the arena, Erin got up from her seat. "I'm gonna go check on him," she told the others. "Princess, take that bitch's head off." Kaylee nodded. "All right." Over half an hour later, Arjun finally returned to the podium. "Many warriors have died in these games," he shouted. "Many warriors have died. Now, let us crown our champion." The crowd cheered. "For our final match, please welcome Kaylee Stoneclaw." Lux, Laeric, and Nephrius were the only ones who didn't applaud as Kaylee walked out. In addition to the blades of Orthrus, she had a trio of 4-foot javelins strapped to her back. "And now, please welcome Princess Kion of Kentoreth." Lux leaped to her feet to cheer Kion on, and her friends followed suit. Kion walked out armed with her daggers and bow. "These deadly ladies have agreed to the use of 2 weapons and 1 enchantment," Arjun said. "The requirements for victory will be death, forfeit, or incapacitation. Do you both understand?" "Yes!" Kion and Kaylee both shouted. "Then, in the name of Emberhaven, fight!" Kion's first arrow would have ended the fight had Kaylee not been wearing a helmet. Stabbing her double sword into the ground, Kaylee took 1 javelin in her left hand and threw it, missing. Taking a javelin in each hand, she began advancing, and Kion's second arrow bounced off her armor as she did. Kaylee stopped long enough to throw her second javelin, which grazed Kion's right thigh but failed to even draw blood. Kion's third arrow intercepted Kaylee's last javelin, causing both projectiles to fall short. Kaylee went to retrieve her double sword, and Kion fired a green-feathered arrow, hitting the back of Kaylee's right shoulder through a gap in her armor. The mercury arrow had quickly melted, and the wooden shaft fell to the ground. Kaylee groaned in pain as she pulled her primary weapon out of the ground, then turned to face the Boread princess. "What poison was that?" she asked, twisting the handle and splitting her weapon in 2. "Fire seed? Vile thorn? You'll just have to wait and see." Kion knocked a red-feathered arrow. "Just be glad fatal poisons are banned, otherwise it would have been obsidian leaf." Furrowing her brow, Kaylee charged. Kion fired, and her arrow grazed Kaylee's left cheek. Discarding her bow, Kion drew her daggers and stood her ground as Kaylee got closer. She dodged Kaylee's first attack and parried her second, only to take a punch to the gut. Her armor softened the blow, but Kaylee's metal glove still hit hard enough to make her stumble back. Growling, Kion rushed forward, getting inside Kaylee's reach and delivering several lightning-fast slashes to her limbs and torso. Most of the attacks merely scratched Kaylee's armor, but one opened a gash in Kaylee's left thigh, and ice began forming around each spot a moment later. Kion targeted the left side of Kaylee's neck with her right dagger, but Kaylee stopped Kion's arm with her own, then headbutted the princess, making her stumble back a second time. Kaylee pressed the attack, only to gasp in pain when she moved her right arm. The green-feathered arrow had been carrying burning flower, a natural poison that made the muscles around the affected wound painful to move. It was non-fatal, but it could take 8 to 10 hours to wear off, depending on the dose and the victim's metabolism. As more muscles in her arm and shoulder were affected, Kaylee lost hold of her right sword. Kion took advantage of her opponent's hesitation and lashed out, only for Kaylee to attack at the same time. Their blades clashed, and Kion narrowly avoided getting backhanded by Kaylee's bulky right vambrace. Kaylee's attacks became increasingly aggressive as the poison took full effect. She growled every time she moved her right shoulder, barely concentrating enough to use proper techniques. Spawning an opening, Kion got inside Kaylee's guard and drove her left dagger into the human woman's side. Before Kion could do anything else, Kaylee suddenly sank her teeth into the left side of her neck and ripped out a piece of flesh. Caught off guard, Kion dropped her left dagger and pressed that hand to her wound, and Kaylee stabbed her through the belly without hesitation. Val awakened in his cot to find his torso bandaged. Looking around, she saw Erin laying on her cot, which was set up where the metal tub she borrowed had been. He also saw Lux sitting in a chair, and Kion curled up on Lux's cot, her torso also bandaged. Seeing that he was awake, Aaron rushed over to him. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Not the best," he replied, sitting up. "What happened?" "What do you remember?" "Kaylee beat me," he said after thinking for a moment. Did she try to take my head off?" "Looks like it," Aaron replied. "That, or she was actually aiming for your face." Val looked at Lux, then at the woman asleep on her cot. "What happened to her?" "Your girlfriend powered through some burning flour and put a sword's entire blade through her gut," Lux said, sounding bitter. "Kyle's lucky there was no damage to her spine." He put his head in his hands. "I don't understand how this happened. Kaylee was never this brutal, even in a real fight." "I believe you," Aaron assured him. "But clearly she's changed just as much as you, if not more." Val laid back on his pillow, tears rolling down his cheeks, as he struggled to accept that his first love had tried to kill him and nearly succeeded. Alright, so ends Chapter 6, and so ends Part 1. We'll begin Part 2 either next week or the week after, depending on what I decide to do next week. Until then, stay safe in these crazy times.